Representative Jeanne Ives, we've spoken many times over your legislative career, and this may be the last time we speak, at least as you being a state representative, as we are here on you have one more day after today, I guess, and then only until noon, is that right?
That's right. About in noon on Wednesday we're done, so 2 days from now.
Just to remind the audience, when were you first elected and joined the legislature?
So I joined the legislature basically 6 years ago in January of 2013. So I've been here 6 years.
As you are wrapping up your legislative career, and people will remember you ran for governor, so you've had a very high profile among Republican House members. What lessons do you take away, and maybe when you entered the legislature, perhaps there were some ideas you had about the legislature that you found out were not as true as you thought they were. So in general, what are your perspectives as you now leave the legislature?
Well, when I went to become a state legislator, I went there to basically defend taxpayers, and I thought that would be a common goal that would be good bipartisan effort. I think we all should control taxes and be for limited government. I think my biggest surprise was that really the Democrats are not interested in that. And then to come to find out that actually some Republicans aren't interested in either. That they have this big government mentality, that government can solve everybody's problems. And it's just not true. And so I'm just shocked at the way that some of my bills and my fellow legislators' bills have been completely blocked from even having a committee hearing, from even going to the floor for a vote, from just, there's absolutely, everybody votes here on emotion. And the other side's agenda, or the party who's in control's agenda. They do not really vote on facts. And I find that shocking for such an important body that really can affect 12.8 million lives in the state of Illinois. We should be having more deliberate debate, more fact-finding debate. We should be open to all sorts of ideas and get the best results for everybody. And that is not what has happened in the 6 years I've been in Springfield.
Are there any specific examples, just in a nutshell, that you can cite some legislation where people were voting maybe without the facts?
Certainly. One of them is a bill that I ran that said, look, taxpayers deserve to know what these contracts look like before they are voted on by the union membership and then approved by the public body. So I wrote a bill saying you should put this information on a website. You can view it for 14 days, have one public hearing in conjunction with your regular meeting before it goes to a vote, so the taxpayers know what they're having to pay for. And that bill that got statewide recognition by editorial boards and such got demolished in committee. And in fact, the committee chairman, when I first presented the bill back in 2013, his words to me were, well, I was told to kill your bill, but since I like you, I'm going to at least give it a hearing. I mean, that's the mentality down here. They've already decided that they don't like the legislation because it's not good for their constituencies that support them in the political sphere.
You know, we have 118 House members, and to what extent is the House not really participatory in the terms of 118, but where the real power only comes down to a handful of people?
That's that's precisely what happens. Mike Madigan and his Rules Committee control the outcome of every single bill. And even if they let it out of Rules Committee, all of his committee chair people have got to toe his line on which bills actually get presented to the floor. Now, I've gotten bills passed in the legislature, and I've had Democrats help me with those bills. And I've worked together with them to pass bills. In fact, one of the biggest one had to deal with making sure that there were enough health care options for people around the state. And so I'm happy to work with Democrats on common good. Another one was the College of DuPage, getting an audit done for them and then getting contracts limited for those upper administrative levels. So I worked with the Democrats, and in fact, they were more of a friend towards my bill than the Republicans. And so if they like your bill and it supports their frame of mind, they're willing to work with you. But anything else, they won't even give it a hearing. It doesn't even get to be vetted, and I think that's a problem.
There have been a number of times, and I think this is kind of the reputation you have of being fiercely independent, where you would be maybe one of 2 or 4 people out of the entire House to vote against something. How hard is it as you as an individual, and what kind of flack do you take from other House members when you stand up strongly opposed to something that 99% of the House is going to vote for?
Well, they don't really give me any flack because they know it would not be useful. But every time you run the risk of being just that outlier that maybe made the wrong vote. But I've had people actually come to me afterwards and said, how come you're the only one who voted correctly? How come you're the only one? And let me give you a great example of this one. It deals with the Michelle Mussman bill. She's a Schaumburg Democrat. She ran a bill based on the Obama guidelines on sexual assault on college campuses. And she took Obama guidelines that dealt with sexual assault, saying that you can anonymously online report sexual assault on a college campus, that it only would be an administrator with 40 hours of experience that could adjudicate this whole very serious crime if that's what happened, and gave actually the accused no rights at all, or very minimal rights in the entire process. She took guidelines from the federal government, put it into state statute, and I was the only no vote in the House and in the Senate on that. And what have we come to find out? All of those rulings are getting reversed at the court level and now in the Trump administration at the education level. Why? Because they violate Fourth Amendment protections. But when I brought that up on the House floor, that we should not put this in state statute, they're only federal guidelines, they could change. I had a colleague of mine come across and say, you know what, I'm a guy, I cannot vote against this. That's the wrong attitude. This is harmful policy for the accused. And if it's a serious crime like that, it doesn't help the person who was a victim. These folks, if they actually had sexually assaulted people, need to be prosecuted in the court of law. And so it minimizes
There's no due process for an accused.
That's right, on either side, and it's a very serious offense. So that's one example where now that we have the state statute, federal guidelines are changing, we need to reverse course here. We need to rewrite that legislation. But we won't until a court case comes forward and makes that happen. There was another one on a property tax vote where I was the only no vote because I knew that the underlying bill was harmful for the majority of taxpayers. And sure enough, the Daily Herald came out and vindicated my vote, saying the taxpayers in my district would actually have a higher property tax overall than we would have not a lower one. And yet I was the only no vote because everybody else was worried that when it came to election time, the other side would say, you didn't vote for property tax relief. Well, I didn't because it wasn't relief for my district, but it's hard to explain that in mailers that cost $10,000 and $15,000 a piece.
And really, it's often, and you were the victim of an attack by Governor Rauner in the primary when you ran against him, where he basically just lied about you, and you see that all the time, and it's really, I'll editorialize, I suppose, that we as citizens are misserved because we ought to vote against someone or for them based upon factual information, not because someone is lying about you and mischaracterizing who you are as an individual. If we follow that line, then we're voting against someone that theoretically we should be supporting. I mean,
well, that's exactly what's happening here. They're taking niche issues, blowing them up like they're the only thing that we talk about down there. So, for example, if you voted against the budget, it means that you didn't want to fund rape kits. Now, first of all, that's a ridiculous notion. Second of all, there's not a single example, even during the budget impasse, when nobody had available to them a rape kit. It just didn't happen. Yet they use these extreme ideas that because you care about a balanced budget and that the people are lying on both sides, both the spending side and the revenue side, that you care that the budget is balanced. Because this is our 18th unbalanced budget in a row, by the way. And this is what has fed our unfunded bill problem. But because you care about that, that means you don't care about the poor and the disadvantaged and rape kits and domestic violence. It's not true. We've never set priorities in any of our budgeting, which is why we overspend all the time.
If I gave you a magic wand and you could make changes to the system, what kind of changes would you make to make this a better running state?
Well, number one is we have to have pension reform. It all falls from pension reform, and that's the biggest reform we have to work on. It's bankrupting not just our state, but it's bankrupting the local levels. And so this is one of the reforms. And how do you get there? How do you get to that? I don't have a good answer for you. It's a political will issue at this point, and it's a voter education issue at this point. We have got to do a better job educating the voters. And the folks that are sitting here in these seats aren't going to do it. They're not making the right arguments on the House floor. They're not telling you how they're voting in committee. We have to have a stronger media presence, quite frankly, to get out the facts about what is happening in Springfield. And they're not going to do it. The political ruling class is not going to do it. So we're going to need other citizens to just help lift people's knowledge level on government and how it functions and the policy outcomes that flow from some of these bills.
The most recent numbers were, I think, about 45,000 people left the state.
Yes.
That's like the third year in a row or fourth year in a row, and the numbers are going up every year.
It's getting worse.
Knowing what you know, what is your look ahead for the state of Illinois?
I'm not optimistic, and for two reasons. One, I know the people who just got elected, and I know what their agenda is, and I also know that the Republican Party has been feckless and lacks leadership on taking on core issues. And so I don't have a lot of hope that there's going to be a lot of obstacles thrown up against this progressive Democrat agenda that is going to bleed our citizens dry. So I am not optimistic. See, what happens here is that people look at their individual circumstances, and when they see their property taxes go up another $750 this year, which ours did, by the way, when they see that happening, and then they look to their, maybe their business isn't operating as profitably either as it could in other states, and you're bleeding businesses. When they look at that, and then they look at the scams going on, where you have the shakedown happening in Chicago with Alderman Burke, when you have the Democrats trying to force out a 19-year-old by having 2,600 people sign a false affidavit to get him off the ballot. I mean, and that's not getting prosecuted. When our own governor-elect took a property tax break of $330,000 because he signed a false affidavit, his wife did at least, and that's not prosecuted. When you see one scam after another, and you know how feckless your politicians are, I don't have a whole lot of hope for this state. But you know what? In 2 years we could just have a whole turnabout and turn everybody out who's not voted properly.
What does the future hold for Jeanne Ives? Do you try to become the head of the Republican Party? As I have said in the past, I think a lot of Republicans around the state responded, obviously, to your campaign.
Sure.
You almost threw Governor Rauner out as the Republican nominee. And since we last spoke, by the way,
yes,
it came out that then he was trying to get other people to run in his stead, thinking he couldn't win. So let me actually, before we go to your future,
right,
what was your response or reaction when you heard that the governor was shopping for other people to run?
Well, I wasn't surprised. We had heard the rumors on my campaign side the entire time, prior to the in the summer. We had heard that he was doing this. So I was not surprised when it came out. And it's just incredible that he actually had the guts to say it, because he's basically trying to shift blame. Oh, I wasn't trying that hard, that's why I lost. It's just incredible. But, I have a problem with the Republican Party because they let him get away with it. Like, the leadership knew or should have known, and I'm convinced that they knew. In fact, apparently, if you asked Richard Porter, Richard Porter is part of our leadership, Republican leadership. If he asked him and he didn't fess up and say something publicly, shame on him. I mean, this is such a failure. It's embarrassing, quite frankly. Yeah.
As a political observer, I might volunteer that I don't know that the Governor Rauner, having looked at his record, would have been reelected, but nonetheless, right, to the extent that if he wasn't as hard in it, I don't know why he bothered to even seek the nomination.
I agree, because especially when you have a progressive left person like J.B. Pritzker, who looks just like Rauner, same sort of billionaire class, same sort of private equity or, sort of background, and not really one of the common men, not really one to suffer under high property taxes because they can afford anything. When you can't draw a stark contrast in this state, which you need to draw, then he should have stepped aside and let somebody be that contrast figure, because we would have had much more informed policy debates rather than have all this voting on emotion and personality and essentially pocketbooks. And so it's unfortunate for Illinoisans that their choices were two men who I thought were both unqualified for the position.
At some point here, not too long from now, probably, you'll be attending your last House
Yes.
chamber
Yes.
meeting. So we'll let you go, but let me then ask a question. Do you yet know any what the future holds for you? And I'm sure, like I said, a lot of people around the state of Illinois, I think, want to continue to hear what Jeanne Ives thinks about the issues.
Well, you know, I'm not leaving the state of Illinois. I still have 2 children in high school. My husband has a solid job here, and in fact, it's expanding more in Illinois, what he's going to be doing on the infrastructure side. So we're not planning to leave anytime soon. And so from that standpoint, I plan on being in the fight. I plan on trying to connect dots for voters on policy issues. We have to have more of these informed discussions about why your property taxes are so high. Do we need a gas tax or not? We don't. What are other states doing for better practices? Where does personal responsibility play into getting better government? So that's what I plan on doing.
Well, Jeanne Ives, it's been a pleasure over the years, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching the Illinois Channel. You may also wish to follow us online, where you are free to make comments or program suggestions. Get our breaking news updates on Twitter, where you can find us at Illinois Channel. You can find our past programming on YouTube at youtube.com/Illinois Channel TV. Or you can go to the Illinois Channel website at illinoischannel.org. There you can find not only our current video stories and programs, but also our library of past programs, as well as articles that provide additional information about Illinois issues and individuals. The Illinois Channel, keeping you connected to your state, your issues, your home.